Hey y'all, it's Melissa Watson Ward with Shattering Ceilings. I'm so glad that y'all can join us today. Really excited about this podcast today because I get to interview the new CEO of REN. So Amalia Luxardo came in a couple of months ago as the new CEO of REN. And you may be like, well, what is REN? Well, we're going to get into that in just a minute and talk about who REN is, who Amalia is, and what they do and what their priorities are in the political space in the upcoming legislative year. But first, I want to, as always, start with an easy, question. So, Amalia, hello, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Thanks for
I
having me here.
I am good. Thank you for being here today with us. Um, I always like to start with a easy question before we get into the intense questions. And that is, who are your people and who do you find community in? I find that that tells us so much about a person when we are finding out who they are and who they relate to. And so for me, if I had to answer that question, I would either say serial plant killers, or in this today, I would probably say those that are trying to save democracy also, as a more deep answer. But who do you
Yeah.
find community with? Who are your people?
So honestly, as you can imagine, this work is incredibly challenging. So I find community with people that are really joyful and really passionate about their work. I think it's always really nice to be surrounded by people that have a lot of positive energy around you, especially towards the end of the day. But I also find community with people who have a really good appetite. So my love language is food. And there
Mm,
is nothing more authentic when you sit down together breaking bread, and then you can really tell what people's reactions are to that food. Hopefully it's generally good. But I feel like you can't hide where you're really enjoying something or where you think something is just it doesn't really look it just doesn't match with your palate. So people that really enjoy food and having a nice meal together is really where I find my community as well.
that is also my vibe. I love food.
Yeah.
I don't love to cook it, but I love to eat it. So I can relate to you with that. So that
Come
tells us.
on over. I love to cook it.
Ooh, look. All you gotta say is send me the address. I'll be there.
Yes.
So that is a little insight into you, but can you tell our listeners a little bit more about who you are? Where did you come from before being at REN? And then tell us what REN is for those that may be listening who don't know what REN is, which I would be surprised because REN has been a force, y'all, here in South Carolina working on women's and children issues. But tell us a little bit about who you are, where you came from before Ren, and what Ren is.
Yeah. So my name is Amalia Luxardo, as you said. Who I am. I'm the daughter of formerly undocumented immigrants. I'm a first gen here in the United States. I've been in the social justice sector for over 20 years now. Previously, I was living in Arizona. I know that people complain about the heat here, but man, this is a nice spring day for us here. It's been triple digits over there since we left.
Oh,
And there I was the CEO for the Women's Foundation for the state of Arizona. So also doing similar work, nonpartisan political work, advocating for women and girls and their families across the state in Arizona. So not unfamiliar with the challenges, but also the opportunities that this sort of work brings. And so I'll tell you, I'll tell our audience, our listeners, a little bit about REN. REN stands for the Women's Right to Know Empowerment Network. It's a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. We're dedicated to advancing health, economic well-being, and the human rights of South Carolina's women, girls, and gender diverse people. We do a lot of advocacy work over at the state capitol, educating and engaging communities on the issues that impact them the most. And we also work towards building a diverse coalition of statewide partnerships. So we have lots of things going on all at the same time, all at once.
yeah, and I think y'all had a win last legislative season in regards to the period tax, didn't you?
We did, yes. So there are no longer taxes on feminine hygiene products, and
Mhm.
that's something that is going to be implemented next month, I do believe. Yep.
That's exciting. So for those of y'all who don't know, obviously, hygiene products regarding menstruation period. For people who have lower socioeconomic status, less disposable income, that can be a real barrier. And
Mhm.
so Ren worked with the legislatures to be able to remove taxes off of those products to make them more affordable for individuals. So that is a big win. So thank you for that work.
Yeah, you're welcome. There's this fallacy out there that period products are a luxury, but
Right.
all women menstruate.
Yeah.
And so it's something that we need every single month. And I'm glad that that's something that we were able to do. And to be forthcoming, that's something that we had to fight for several years at this
Yeah.
juncture. But I'm really, really glad that it was able to pass this year.
Well, and as you know, Shattering Ceilings, we focus on all things women, South Carolina women. And one thing that we've been talking to some of our previous guests about is the lack of women in the legislature.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, by having so few women, and the men are obviously not experts on these issues,
No.
they don't prioritize them. They don't look at it as an issue because, I mean, I don't think are there any doctors over there
Any doctors were in the
in the
legislature
legislature? Yeah, I
that
don't
I'm aware of now.
yeah, so I mean, you have people who don't have any medical expertise, who in some cases don't even have layman's expertise when it comes to reproductive issues,
Mhm.
or reproductive dysfunctioning. And so to them, you're right, they think it's a luxury item. I mean, some of the things that I see people posting about, menstruation and or women's reproductive issues and how our bodies operate, they really shouldn't be making laws because they
Mhm.
really don't understand how the basic functions function. So I can understand why it was a multi-year fight for people to
Yeah.
understand the significance and the work or the reason why this is important. But thank y'all for that work because it is so important, I think, to have an organization that is focused on women, gender expansive people, children in South Carolina, because again, our voices are so few in the legislature that we need someone over there truly advocating for us.
Yeah. Yeah. You're welcome. We're
Yeah.
happy to do it.
Yeah. So that brings me to the upcoming legislative season. What are going to be the priorities for your organization? What are your priorities going into the next session?
Yeah. So I'll tell you a little bit about some of our more practical priorities internally as an organization, then we'll talk about the next legislative session. So from a practical standpoint, this year we're staffing up. We've been a small staff
Mhm.
for as long as Ren has been in existence, and I think it's due time to increase our capacity, especially with what's coming ahead of us. We want to make sure that the women that have been doing this work for a number of years now have the support that they need. I don't want anybody to be experiencing burnout or anything like that, especially with the amount of institutional knowledge that the folks on staff have. We're also looking forward to doing some deep, really deep and intentional community work. I think it's imperative for us to be engaged with community, especially if we're talking about communities of color. It also means that our legislative agenda is going to be informed by the people of South Carolina. We're really
Mhm.
excited about shifting our work in this way. So, all of that said, our legislative session is not quite completed yet, simply because we're looking for some of that. We are looking for that community feedback, but we are still working towards advocating for comprehensive healthcare, defending the attacks on our bodies, advocating for workplace equality, for workplace equity, and advocating for economic justice for women. So again, those are sort of the what the general thematically what we're looking at, and then the specific policies within those issues are yet to be determined based on what community input that we get. The one thing that I did want to mention here that I think is important is that South Carolina ranks 44th in the nation for gender equity, which isn't good. Women, girls, gender expansive folks, especially those who are poor, of color, and living in rural areas, carry, as you know, a disproportionate share of economic and social burdens. You just mentioned that, Alyssa. And without improved and equitable access to healthcare, education, and economic opportunity, I think that South Carolina is going to have a really hard time in reaching its full potential.
I definitely agree with you on that. And, I hear people sometimes when you criticize the state or your state or you criticize the nation, they're like, "Well, just leave." And I wrote in an article a couple of weeks ago that I love South Carolina. South Carolina, it's home. A majority of the people that I love are here. I love the people. I love the weather. I love the food. I love, the culture. But I don't love where we fall on some of these lists. And I think
Uh,
when you love something, you truly want it to be the best that it can be. And unfortunately, South Carolina has found itself at the bottom of a lot of lists that we should be striving to be closer to the top of. And you're right, when it comes to women and children, that is a list that we often find ourselves at the bottom of, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education. You talk about pay equity. I just wrote an article that was released recently that talked about my own pay equity experience. And, as someone who has some privileges because I have some college degrees, I still found myself making less than what I should have been making with the experience and education I had compared to my white male colleague.
yeah,
16% less. And I guess I should be grateful that it's only 16% compared to what the national average is. And I
yeah,
hear people say stuff like, well, it's the kind of jobs that women have. But even when you compare apples to apples, women are still making less. And the reality is, y'all, there are a lot of female led households in this state. And so when you have women that are leading the household or head of household and they are not being paid what they should be being paid, they suffer, but also our children suffer, our communities suffer. And so pay equity isn't just a talking point. It really is a quality of life issue for our
yeah,
children, for our families here across the state.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree. As a head of household,
Yeah.
yeah, I can say it. To carry that. Look, whether you're male or female, but the
Mhm.
reality is that the bulk of the familial responsibility still lands on the woman when you're talking about childcare and everything like that. And so at the end of the day, if we're not making sure that we are getting the pay that we actually need in order to thrive, then we're not going to be moving the needle in any
Right.
sort of way. And it's going to take, gosh, and when I was doing some of the research on this topic, I think it's going to take South Carolina to 2055 to
Oh,
get
wow.
to, yeah, a place where we have pay equity here if things continue to go in the way that they're going.
And y'all, pay equity impacts people's ability to buy houses, people's ability for childcare, people's ability to pay down their student loans, people's ability just to buy everyday household goods. So, we're talking about, again, real quality of life issues. And don't get me started on childcare. I don't have
Mhm.
any children, but I have nieces and nephews, and I hear the stories about how
Yeah,
much childcare costs and how there are some people that are almost working just to pay childcare costs.
yeah, yeah. So I have 3 kiddos, 2 of which are
Mhm.
in childcare, and their childcare rates recently increased. And so childcare costs as much as rent or a mortgage, if not more in most cases. And so you're right. A lot of people now are not working just to take care of the living expenses, but just to cover, picking up extra shifts or second jobs just to cover the expense of
Mhm.
childcare. The amount that it's gone up over the last several years is astronomical. And I think the biggest mistake that everyone is making, this is not specific to South Carolina, is that we're not talking about childcare or pay equity really as an economic issue because it
Mhm.
is the thing that will get parents back into the workforce. And if you don't have affordable or good quality childcare available close to you, there is no way that we are getting back to work.
Yes.
And working adults is what makes the economy greater in the nation. And so I think that's been part of the problem that we've been having that I've seen over the last, gosh, 5 or 6 years in this work in the gender justice space is that we are not talking about childcare as an economic issue. We're making very much siloing it as a women's issue when it really impacts all of us.
Yes. Yes, it does. It actually does impact all of us. You're exactly right about that. And, when we're talking about the economy, spending money is part of what keeps our economy going. And if
Uh,
people are spending money on childcare and housing costs and they're being underpaid, they can't, spend money in the economy in other ways to make
right.
sure that the economy is flowing. So,
That's
y'all,
right.
this is all interconnected. And like I said, I don't believe women's issues are women's issues. I think women's issues are family issues are community issues. And
Mhm.
so when our women are doing well, our children and our families and our communities can thrive. And so this isn't just a we don't care about men, because we do. It's just that we know that if our women and our communities are doing well, that is actually a trickle down effect, that the children will do well, the community will do well. And so if we want to see thriving communities across the state, we've got to make sure that the women and children are doing well, and especially our children, for the simple fact that they are the next generation of workers. And if we want to have skilled workers, we want to have workers that can take over the jobs, that our people are retiring out of now. We have to make sure that they are taken care of, they're well educated, and things of that nature. Which brings me to, I want to talk a little bit about the Heritage Project, the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025. I
Yeah.
don't know if you've had any time to look over that, but some things that stick out to me when we're talking about women and children issues. So for those of y'all who don't know, the Heritage Foundation is a conservative think tank, and they put out policies. They actually put out a 2023 budget also, which is I'll talk a little bit about the budget and the 2025 project, but some things that between the project they put out, which is basically almost 1,000-page document on policy recommendations for the next president, and they do put out these budgets that they hope that the president will adopt. Some things that are interesting to me when we talk about women and children is the fact that, and gender expansive people, is the fact that they want to remove the words reproductive rights and reproductive health care, reproductive everything from every federal bill, legislation, policy, grant. They will not have it exist. They want to remove LGBTQ plus
Yeah.
from that. They want to remove things like CRT and DEI. CRT, which we know are not being taught in our K through 12 anyway, and DEI and diversity, equity, and inclusion from stuff. They want to do away with Head Start is one thing. They want to do away with the Department of Education and make school more locally based, even though we know we're in a global economy. And they're not addressing childcare. Also, I think I saw decreased funding or complete wipeout of teen pregnancy prevention programs, which we
Mhm.
know have seen great strides, y'all, over the last couple of decades to reduce the number of teen pregnancies. And so when I'm looking at the state of where women and girls are in this country, and then I'm looking at their policy positions and their policy agenda, and the fact that, by removing the Department of Ed and making things local, and don't get me wrong, I think, parents understand what their children need, and parents definitely should have, some decision making, but you have that decision making when you vote for who's on school board. The idea that someone in South Carolina could be educated different than somebody in Washington State, but we are a fluid country where people move all the time.
Right.
Will that South Carolina student be able to compete in that Washington State market if they moved, if we don't have national standards for education? And if we're talking about taking Head Start, and y'all, I'm a product of Head Start. I did Head Start before I went to kindergarten, and I feel like it was something that helped contribute to my love for learning and my education. And we talk about doing away with Head Start, which we know disproportionately supports lower income families. And we're not talking about increasing childcare. We're talking about removing teen pregnancy stuff, reproductive, justice rights, and the word reproductive period from the lexicon. What do these policy agendas mean for women and children?
Yeah. So you asked if I've heard of it or gotten a
Yeah.
chance. I was actually reading through the whole document. I'm a learner.
Ooh,
I stopped at page 489. because that's when they stopped mentioning women at
Mhm.
all. And at that point, I was having a physical reaction to all of the things that you just mentioned. I look, it's a document that reeks of systemic racism and white supremacy through and through. And if people are not reading that, then they need to read it again. As far as what's going to happen to women and girls, they talk about, like you said, removing the words reproductive rights, right, and reproductive health care. It plans for a total abortion ban when Winthrop University has recently done a study, and 84% of South Carolinians believe that women should be able to obtain a legal abortion if it threatens a woman's life, right? And it goes in through different categories of when a woman should obtain abortion. But across the board, it's been 60% or more of South Carolinians that believe that we should have access to abortion. You talked a little bit about eliminating the Department of Education, and they want to increase financial resources to families that want their children to go to private or faith-based institutions. And, let's be really clear. That means that they want to open up to cutting checks to wealthy families that already have access to resources. But then they proceed to say that food programs need to be cut so that low income families don't feel entitled,
Mhm.
right? And low income families are largely comprised of Black and Brown people because, again, these systems are set up for our communities to fail. In the same paragraph that they talk about funding for homeschooling so that parents make those decisions, they also condemn universal childcare, which we just
Mhm.
talked about is truly an economic issue. You already mentioned they're removing the LGBTQ plus words. Like, they completely dehumanize transgender people
Mhm.
by essentially making them disappear. And they are removing a lot of a lot of programs that are benefiting single mothers right now, which, again, most single mothers are women of color. And so all of these policies and all of these proposals that we have in place are only going to compound all of the issues that we already have. And so our commitment is to carefully analyze what all of these policies mean, how it's going to impact our community, and advocate solutions that are going to bring the well-being of all South Carolinians, especially women, girls, and gender expansive folks here.
I definitely do worry about these policies, and I think, everybody should be worried about them because they are going to impact quality of life for you and your children. And the idea that we can just remove a people from, from the words, and just remove an existing population as if they are not going to exist anymore because we remove them from federal guidelines. They're essentially trying to eradicate a whole group of people, y'all, by removing LGBTQ plus and trans individuals, and gender anything. And if you are not LGBTQ plus, you should be worried because of the fact that they want to remove any protections for gender identity, which means as a woman, that even your protections of talking about pay equity and things of that nature can be removed and attacked because they want to remove gender identity completely across the board. So don't think that these are isolated incidents that only impact one particular group of people because it will have a trickle down effect on everybody. Some other things that I saw in there was overtime protections. So, now if you work overtime, there's protections as far as how much you can work, how much you get paid, things of that nature. They want to remove that. They want to consolidate a lot of power within the executive branch instead of
Mm.
having, independent agencies and things of that nature, which means that they're going to get these policies passed. And it always strikes me when we talk about abortion that if we really wanted to decrease abortion, we would actually look at the reasons why people have abortions and try to like increase our safety net programs, increase our teen pregnancy prevention programs, increase access to contraceptives. And the reality is, under their proposals, y'all, we really could see birth control contraceptives disappear. We could see IVF disappear. We could see any abortions disappear, which even means health of the mother because hospitals and doctors don't want to be sued. So even when there are quote unquote exceptions for the health of the mother, what you find is that hospitals and doctors make decisions based on the fact that they unfortunately could be sued and in some cases could have criminal charges brought against them. Some of these states are passing laws like that. So they are playing politics with your life. So for people who are like, oh, well, I don't do politics, politics don't really affect me. These policies absolutely will affect you, whether you're a man, a woman, or non-binary. They're going to impact you in some way, shape, form, or fashion, and probably not for the better.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think what we all really need to understand is that these folks say that they care about the family, right? Holistically. And you're right. What they're doing here is taking away all the support nets that exist instead of increasing them. We studies have shown that the first year postpartum is the most difficult year for mom, and it's also the one where there's a higher likelihood of maternal death.
Mhm.
And yet, it was just up until recently where we've been able to expand medical care for women for the first year postpartum. And there's also been studies that pregnant folks who are able to give a birth are actually in their postpartum years for the first 5 to 7 years after giving birth now. And so it takes that long for your body to readjust and go back to where it was pre-pregnancy. They're taking away, just like we talked about in Project 2025, the accessibility for food for kiddos that going to school. They're condemning universal childcare. So they care about the children and they care about the family up until they give birth, and then after that are, wash their hands and we're on our own again,
Mhm.
which is what history has taught us, that that's what happens over and over. And so it's really, really unfortunate. I think you and I are huge proponents for the quite opposite of that. And again, just really focusing on what solutions we can come up with, because these are really dangerous policies, not just for
Yeah.
South Koreans, but for everyone.
And remember, y'all, even if the presidential choice that the Heritage Foundation probably prefers doesn't win, some of these policies could trickle down to state level policies.
Mhm.
So even if and we've seen them actually starting to trickle down to state level policy. So even if it's not a national policy, it could be a state policy. So for
Right.
example, teaching the 10 Commandments in the Bible in school, which, if we're going to teach one religion, then we should teach all religions in school. But that's not what they want. They're picking and choosing, and so you should be concerned about this. Even if you believe in the Bible, you should be concerned about what version they're teaching of religion to your children, and you
Right.
have no say over that. And if it's happening in other states, it will trickle down and happen here also. The fact that we did not accept, was it the summer food program, the feed the kids over the
Mhm.
summer,
Mhm.
you're having kids go hungry, and y'all, the reality is children can't learn and function if they're hungry. That is
Yep.
the basics of human behavior. If you
Yeah.
don't have shelter, food, water, and clothing, you can't expect these children to thrive and do well. And so and it goes back to economic issues, like you said,
Yeah.
because if we want to see businesses come to South Carolina with good paying jobs, we have to have a well skilled and educated population. Well, that means our children have to receive good education and skills and trades and things of that nature. But if they're hungry, they're not going to be focusing on trying to learn a trade or do well in school if they can't even have their stomachs full. So all of this is, y'all, is interconnected. It comes back to economic issues. So if you are concerned about the economy, you're concerned about your taxes and things of that nature, you need to be concerned about Project 2025, because also knowing where your taxes go, they're wanting to deviate your taxes to private schools and faith-based schools that have no regulations as far as what the children are being taught. It's just, and again, I am for freedom of education. I want people to be able to pick and choose where they're, to a certain degree, but I also don't want to abandon our public schools. You know, if you want to send your child to a private school, that's fine, but we should not abandon our public schools, because what we're going to be abandoning is our Black and brown kids. They're the ones that are going to suffer the most. Our lower income individuals, because even with those vouchers, they're not going to be able to afford private schools ranging $20,000 and $30,000 a year. So remember, think about who is being impacted by these policies. And even if you are not individually impacted, think about your compassion and your empathy for those that are, because there
Yeah.
are people in your community that will be impacted. And like I said, I don't have children, so I don't technically have a fight in the education range, but I want to see my community and my state do well. And so I am happy that my taxes go to pay for the public school down the street, because I want to see those children well educated so they can contribute back to South Carolina economy, they can contribute back to the state, and our state can do well. So y'all, we all have a what is it? A something in the fight. Something in the fight. We all have a piece of
We
this fight.
Yeah, that's right. Some skin in the game.
The skin in the game. There we go. We all have skin in the game, even if you're not directly impacted by this. You know, think about those that are, and how this is going to change the fabric of our nation and the fabric of our state if these policies are put into place. Yeah. So, anything else do you want to say about Ren or the legislature, or the policies that y'all are looking at?
You know, we're just gearing up for what's coming. I think a lot of our moves and some of what our next steps are going to be based on what the next election does, right?
Okay.
So that we're prepared with our messaging,
Mm.
and the way that we sort of navigate what those policies are going to be. But truthfully, I hope that people take me seriously when I say that I want to be out in your community, getting your feedback. I want to know what's challenging you the most, so that we can figure out how to pull back the curtain on some of those things.
And y'all, we have to send Ren some supporters in the legislature. You know, unfortunately, Senator Katrina Shealy will not be returning, and she was a big advocate for women and children's issues. And I know worked with Ren on some specific legislation, trying to get things passed to really make this state a better state for our women and children. And so they can't get their work done if they don't have people in the legislature that's going to help fight with them. You know, legislators that are going to understand the needs of the women and children in the state. And so it's important for y'all, when you're voting in November, to really look at those candidates and make sure they have the interests of our women and children in mind, because if not, all this good stuff that Ren wants to get done to make this a better state for women and children will not get passed. Now,
Yeah.
so I want to move on to a couple of light. So we've kind of delved into the deep of policy. I want to move on to some lighthearted questions before we wrap up. My next question is, who who are some women who inspire you? And I ask that question because I understand that this work is hard. Advocacy work is hard, y'all. The work that Ren does is hard, especially when they're met with a whole bunch of no's over across the street. They're across the street from the state house. When they're met with no's across the street, you know, and constant no's, it's hard to get that one yes. And so to not get discouraged, you know, to still wake up every morning and do this work. Who are the women who inspire you to keep going and to do this work?
Yeah, I honestly, the women who inspire me every day are my colleagues in the communities that have been carrying this work for decades. If it wasn't for them, you and I wouldn't be talking today. I also think the people that inspire me the most are my mothers and the women in my family. You know, outside of my children, they're the very reason why I'm so deeply committed to this work. And I also think about Michelle Obama in her book Becoming, who is an incredibly inspirational human being in general. But there's one part in her book that stayed with me, and it was a time that she was called for an interview for the University of Chicago Medical Center. And she had lost her childcare, and really she had, if she wanted to take the interview, the only option that she had was to bring baby Sasha,
Mm.
she was 4 months then, with her, and just going in there and taking that interview, because you know that's what you have to do. I think as women, a friend of mine told me, when there is no way, we still find it because we have to. And I will tell you, like I said, I have 3 kiddos, and every single one of them has attended some sort of board meeting, some sort of leadership council session, some sort of speaking engagement. And so they're very familiar with both virtually and in person. So they're very familiar with having to be on Zoom and that sort of thing. But I think again, just everyday women are my deepest source of inspiration because when there is no way, we always find it no matter what.
Yes, there are women out here, y'all, who are rubbing 2 pennies together to make it work, and they're making it work for their families. But we don't want them to have to work as hard. So, we need to pass policies to support those everyday women who are out here, who are supporting their families, they're supporting their communities, they're finding time. I don't know how sometimes between work and raising a family to still advocate for their communities. And so that's so important. And you're right, women just get things done, and are solution focused. And not to say again that men aren't, but women, because we're tasked with so many responsibilities and multitasking, we have to just get it done, and not have the excuses as to why we can't get it done. So I'm with you. I admire those women that are out there making it happen for their families, making it happen for those communities. And you're right. We wouldn't be doing this work without their support, their motivation, and without their expertise, even lending their experiences to help us figure out the how what we
Yeah,
do.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
So my last question is, what is one piece of advice you would give to our women listeners?
To not give up hope. I know that there's a lot of doom and gloom out there every day, day in and day out. Just I want you all to know that you are not alone. We are here with you, and hopefully together we can make some really great things happen in South Carolina. So please, 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 do not give up hope. I am going to do a shameless plug. For folks that are interested in learning more about our organization, to visit www.scwren.org. As I said, we're in the midst of building out our next phase. There's a big pop-up that says, tell us more about what your interests are. And so if folks are interested in filling out that survey, I'd love to hear from you. We are going to be making calls to action to community soon as we gear up for our legislative session. But again, I can't say this enough. We're here with you all. We're not giving up hope. Our mission is so incredibly important, especially these days. And I just want to make sure that people know that there is a light in the darkness here.
Well, thank you. Well, y'all are definitely the light. And we appreciate everything that you're doing, fighting for South Carolina women and children. So thank you. And thank you
Thank
for
you.
sitting down with me today on Shattering Ceilings. And thank y'all for joining us for another episode. We really appreciate you. And we appreciate even more if you will subscribe to the Arena SC. So please make sure to hit that subscribe button or enter your email to subscribe, so that you won't miss any of the exciting updates from myself and my colleagues, articles, podcasts, interviews, everything, politics, culture, sports. We are here for it. And if you want to be here with us, go ahead and subscribe. So thank y'all today. Thank y'all for listening today. Bye.